Coding, please, Marina. I'm greeting all of you, all of our colleagues, and I'm very proud to be to moderate discussion in behalf discussion virtual battlefield of the Russo-Ukrainian war, digital media disinformation and visualization of the conflict, discussion that provided by Choice Center of East European and International Studies, Berlin. I'm Olena Zinenko. I'm fellow of this year of UNET Ukrainian network, and I'm journalist and now more researcher in the field of media studies. My PhD examined the discourse of public events, and now I use my methodology to understand, to analyze social media and media. So I am a senior lecturer as well in Karazin Kharkiv National University. And yeah, today is second part of the discussion that is about war discourse and public opinion. We will try to reactualize of and performativity in digital media during the Russo-Ukrainian war. We will have 2 hours, 3 speakers, I hope. And today our discussion will focus on performativity, or rather on performative action, which encourage the discussion of certain events in the media. I will try to outline the highlights. So today we will talk about propaganda as creativity, fact as performance, and entertainment as a soft power of cultural policy or maybe political policy. For 2 years now, the war has been a longitudinal public macro event for us, and micro events of the war which relate to frontline or everyday life is discussed in media, online media, social media. It is lively discussed, and this discussion was both organic and organized by stakeholders, influenced by him, initiated. And the first question that arises is about the security of communication and about harmful effects of propaganda. It is something that highlights first. And now I will give a floor to Artem Zakharchenko, associate professor at Kyiv National University and head of the CAT-UA analytical team that this team doing war discourse analysis from the first day of full-scale invasion. And so, Artem, floor is yours, and we are intrigued.
Thank you, Olena. So let me, do I have permission of sharing my screen? Yeah, I do. Okay. So it will be a kind of initial mapping of the directions of the analysis, and it's a very brief overview of our baseline knowledge that we use to analyze Russian propaganda and also counter-propaganda that is made by Ukrainians. So let me start with the slide. That is common in most of my presentations. It's a slide about the levels of information impact. So let's start. A lot of measures aimed at countering Russian propaganda are focused on the simple fact-checking. So people usually look on the lie spread by Russian channels and think that debunking these fakes is enough to counter this propaganda. But let's focus on the So fact level is just the first level of information impact. We can see these blue dots that symbolize every single fact. So people, can understand facts, false or true facts, and that is the basic line, and there is no impact without information impact without facts, but this level is just the basic level. Mostly this next level of messages used by PR practitioners, so that means attitude to facts and links between facts. Most of messages are have such structure that they tell us about attitudes or about links between facts. The next level is agenda level, so we can see some of facts more salient and some of connections more salient, some of links more salient. So when propaganda works at agenda level, they distort their perception of the reality and make some facts more salient than another. And the last level of propaganda is narrative level. That is the consequence of facts, that is story with its storyline, and it makes some conclusions from one fact to another. So it's the most complicated level of acting. So if we work with propaganda that works, that applies all these four levels, we also have to counteract on it on all four levels. And also we can take in our minds that narrative level, it's more or less like creative level, not just technical level. Yes, we apply some methodologies to provide structural analysis of strategic narratives, national narratives, and so on. But in any case, it is more or less connected to creative writing, the process of creation of these narratives. So it's not only about calculating and so on, and fact and providing true facts. Let's see it in depth. Yeah, that is usually considered as tactic communication, and the fourth level is considered as strategic communication. So if we when we deal with such enemy that applies strategic planning not only on the battleground but also in information space, we also have to be to apply strategic thinking. But there are some problems on the way of countering enemy's narratives. And one of them is that media don't usually often recognize that they have power to choose between the narratives. Let's see. They usually tell that we just do our own work. They answer when I ask, why do you spread this narrative? They tell me that we don't think, we do our work, we inform people, we separate important facts from unimportant, and so on. They also tell, we just do thorough fact checking. So yeah, of course, they check every fact in their publication. They do it more or less professionally, but also there are a lot of issues about the level of internal fact-checking in Ukrainian media outlets. But that is not enough, and we will see why. And also, they usually tell us that we don't have enough data to think about the reasons for newsmakers. So we just do our own work. We don't think about that. Okay, but Russians, as I told before, use strategy to spread their narratives. They don't only construct the narratives. We usually compare situation on battleground with the situation in information space, and we usually say that as on the battleground we need first guns and weapons, but second we need logistic. The same thing is information battleground. We have to use good strategic narratives, but also we have to develop the logistic for providing our audiences with our narratives. So we have to make some specific measures to use it strategically, and that is the plot from our current research that is about the strategies of Russian propaganda, where we analyze the methodology of their messages, of their emotions, of their channels, and a lot of things. But that is just one of the plots where we can show that Russians mostly use negative emotions and first of all anger in their topics of in their most prominent topics of propaganda. We can see that only in the case of destroying Western equipment, they mostly focus on joy, but in most of other cases, we analyzed 6 cases on that report, we can see that they focus mostly on negative emotions, and that is just one of the details about their strategy. So we can, after our research, we can think much more about counter strategies. Well, what are the parts of the narrative? And let me highlight this 4th level. So the narrative consists of the storyline that connects facts, the salience of the facts, and the connections of the facts. So the narrative relies on all 3 levels that are previous in on my slide, but also it's it adds their storyline, it adds their logical consequences, more or less logical, because they also usually apply logical fallacies, and yeah, it is important to understand narrative in all its structure. How can journalists avoid being used by propagandists? First of all, every time you write a story, think about all 4 levels of influence. That is very important. Do not borrow framing, because mostly journalists don't think about the framing of the fact. They usually see that fact in the information source already has some framing, and they just use the same framing in their publications, and don't think that somebody will be interested to promote not only this fact but also this framing. Take care of an objective agenda and understand where the story you are telling came from. You can just do fact checking. Yeah, so think, is it important and is it natural to highlight this fact instead of another? Maybe now it is more important to tell people the facts, to pay more attention to other agenda facts. So every journalist has to understand himself as an agent of influence. So he or she has understand that he or she also impacts on the agenda, despite he or she may be just a normal news editor, one of thousands, but also he or she also has its impact. And that's the second way, the second point, every time you also need to think about why Do you got the news? Who might be interested in your publication? Usually news don't, in our information world, news usually don't appear by themselves. Somebody is interested in creating this news, and probably it can be enemy. Regarding the country, on the previous slide we talked about journalists, but now let's speak about the countries. And the only way for a country not to be conquered by the foreign narrative is to have its own strong narrative, national narrative, strategic narrative, and so on. As I told before, national narratives and strategic narratives have very complicated structure, but here I can show just one slide that can be compared, where we a Ukrainian narrative on the first month of the war and pro-Russian narrative in Ukraine that they spread in pro-Russian propagandistic sources. So that is that part that focused on short stories about the heroes of the war. And in Ukrainian information space, mostly created by Ukrainian users, there were a lot of stories about ordinary people. This grandmother that downed the drone by this jar of pickles. That is, of course, it's a folklore story, but it was prominent. Or this normal post officer that downed Russian jet. And also, of course, there was story about Zelensky that remained in Kiev, but Zelensky was not the main hero, the main character of this war. The opposite was in Russian pro-Russian narrative, that we saw that Putin was on the center of this narrative, and there were a lot of so-called heroes on the beginning of the war, but their stories were told in this, you can see this bureaucratic style, so they didn't look as heroes. So Ukrainian narrative was a good answer to Russian narrative on the beginning of the war, but it was only on the beginning. As for now, as people, normal people in social media just gave up and stopped developing this narrative, stopped their creativity. We had a lot of we have got a lot of problems, and these problems are remain actual currently. And the last thing we have to know that narratives are both products of evolution with natural selection and of construction. So we can compare it with the natural beings that evolve and with the messages of cultural evolution. Maybe you know this this area, this approach, but also they can be compared with artificial intelligence, or creatures, constructed agents. So let's see how it works. So state constructs the narrative. State usually tries to make narrative that motivate people to struggle. Effective public constructs the narrative, that is a special state of the audience that works with that works inside social media during very large social movements. So it's if somebody will be interested, I can send links to the research of Zizi Papacharisi that describe this state of audience in social media. Then narratives can help their states to survive. So it's like a feature of natural selection. So states that have a stronger narrative are more have more chance to survive, and also competing narratives can be even inside a state. We can see it, for example, inside. We could see it inside Afghanistan state that there were two competing narratives, like pro-Western narrative and Taliban narrative. And the same thing was in Ukraine, where in 2013 we had 5 national narratives instead of 1. And as for now, we are just finishing our research about national narratives, and we will see soon how much national narratives we have for now after 2 years of the war, and which are more competitive. Well, that's all. Thank you for your attention, and if you have answer, please ask.
Thank you, Artem. I need to say that we will have now 2 more speakers, and afterward we will open the discussion. Okay. So just select your questions, and we will go to it after three speakers. And yes, what we see in this narrative, so we see that it is go to division between sides of war, for example, yeah. But what we see in our discourse of war, we see that some facts united people inside the Ukraine, yeah. And now we will think about, all of us saw the story about Oscar and 20 days of Mariupol. It is how this story goes to recognized media, yeah. But how it works at the very beginning. It is a question of evidences and a question of people who were there. And now I will give the floor to Olena Melnykova-Kurganova. She witnessed at the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Mariupol in 2022, and she lived under the city's siege for a while. She was born and lived in Mariupol until she left the besieged town on 16th of March. So today's, yeah, tomorrow will be like date of it. March 2022. She has been teaching journalism in Mariupol State University since 2008. And she has also written journalistic articles about life in the frontline town since 2040 for national media outlets such as newspaper then and Detector Media. In her research, public communication of in a city under attack, Russia's informational influence on the citizens of Mariupol, university that she did in University of Passau, Germany. She analyzes the types of communication in the besieged city, Russian propaganda, and the journalist work at the beginning of the war. I will give you the floor. Thank you to be with us. Olena, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm Olena Melnykova-Kurganova, and I'm a witness of the siege of Mariupol. And I should tell that I felt how difficult it's to survive in an information blockade with no internet and any type of communications. And I understood which the Mariupol journalists had been under the siege, and they answer to my research questions. So I propose my topic. One moment. I'm sorry. So did you see? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I studied the role of Telegram in the siege of the city, and another type of communication, of course. My research questions, for example, you see on the screen. How did Telegram channels in Mariupol change during the siege? How did the performativity help journalists communicate with residents? I analyzed social media post-video photos on the research topic, and I interviewed 22 residents and 22 journalists of Mariupol. We used research method, and so you can see that document analysis and semi-structured qualitative interviews, because it's important to fill in the gap left after the document analysis conducted via an encrypted video calling service. The literature has already presented several evolutions of impact of the war in Ukraine, but so far, to the best of my knowledge, no studies have explored yet how the media and news consumption has changed during the war, particularly in the city, in the besieged city. We should understand the context of the media in Mariupol, and on February 22, you can see an action against the Russian invasion of Ukraine was held in Mariupol, and Mariupol citizens protested against the war. They wanted to be heard by the international community because there were many foreign journalists in the city. We can see the conditions in the city when Mariupol was in the siege. The lack of electricity, the lack of internet, mobile communication, the lack of water, the lack of heating, the lack of gas, food supplies, and so on. When electricity was in the city, we watched our television and see only this information. You see this picture, and we used some social media because there were a lot of information, and in particular Telegram. You can see the siege of Mariupol from the 2nd of March to 2022 to 20 of May 2022. Some chronology of the siege of Mariupol, because in that period, from the 2nd of March to 20th of May, there are no some types of communication, and mobile communication and internet access were quite limited during the period. Some people could use generators for charging mobiles, but this gave only a temporary access to digital communication. This is the types of public communication in Mariupol under the siege, and you can see that people use traditional media and social media in the first week of the full-scale invasion. And after that, we have jamming of Ukrainian radio. We have some problems with the mobile connection, and some of Mariupol journalists created leaflets, and so Russian propaganda spread in the city. We can see that it's really interesting how to change Mariupol landscape in this period. And what about Telegram? Telegram channels in Mariupol. We can see that since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a large number of messages and many Telegram channels have appeared in Mariupol. And I analyzed these Telegram channels, and the most of them started back in 2nd of the March 2022, because in this day Mariupol was without electricity and mobile and internet communication. You can see that official Telegram channels of Mariupol authorities, and Mariupol residents used these Telegram channels, and for example, the SMM specialist of Telegram channel of Mariupol authority said in our interview that residents growth in that period from 10,000 people to 100,000 people. It's amazing. And we can see the Russian Telegram channels were created in that period. So we can see these names and symbols and so on. What about content of messages in Telegram channels? We can see that some of them post, for example, more text messages about the shelling of the city, and photos and videos from residents of Mariupol. For example, we can see some messages about humanitarian supplies and addresses for residents of Sartana and other villages which was bombed near Mariupol. And some official messages from Ukraine, from president and so on. Some reports from pro-Russian Telegram channels, but we didn't know that it was pro-Russian Telegram channels. For example, Новые Ведомости. We can see this Telegram channel and today, but it is supported by pro-Russian Shari. Information about and in particular all our Telegram channels published content of this Новые Ведомости. Information about the official green border in March, Russian occupation of city districts, repost of video, photo materials from the Azov battalion. I asked my respondents about sources which they used before the war, And you can see the results of this answer. After that, we spoke about the period under the siege of Mariupol. And we can see that Telegram channel was very popular because we understand that Telegram loaded better than other sources. And sources of information before about traditional media, and you can see these types of communication. And traditional media under the siege, and you can see that radio was very popular in that period. And mobile communication, because some of Mariupol residents had generators, and they knew about top of the ground of Mariupol city, and sometimes they want to call to relatives to give and so on. Information before the full-scale invasion of Russia. This information I used after our interviews with the Mariupol journalists, and they think that these events are very important. You can see on this slide. Yeah, about mobilization in the Donetsk People Republic, and about large number of foreign journalists arrived it was in 2014, and the visit of Zelensky and Akhmetov to the city. We asked journalists from Mariupol about the peculiarities of the work before the information blockade and during the siege of the city, and it's you can see really interesting tendency of their journalist work, and so for example, some of them had their Telegram channel and some alternative information published in that Telegram channel. So another information about SMM for Mariupol, rather Mariupol authorities. You can see that city's Telegram grew. And they understood that Russians read this Telegram channel too. Russian agents, propagandists, and so on. Another tendency, we can see multi-channel dissemination of narratives in Telegram. And some of respondents, Mariupol journalists, you can see, read these quotes, think that there are so many different Telegram channels that were posting false information, and there were many pro-Russian propaganda channels in Mariupol with some narratives. For example, we will take Kyiv in 3 days and so on. And you can see another quotes that Telegram channels was really popular because in 2014 we have the same experience, but we can see that journalists and residents used another social media. Another tendency, we can see Russians created a large number of Telegram channels, and Mariupol journalists remembered this period, and you can see that there were many local Telegram channels. For example, Telegram channels of districts of Mariupol, for example, Left Bank of Mariupol, and so on. It was really important too. And you can see that some of journalists said that it reminded me of 2014. And the next tendency that a lot of news were in that period, we understand that it was not only in Mariupol, and Mariupol journalists said about their work, and they prepared a lot of news, and they read and work with some sources, and they said about this tendency, a lot of news in Telegram channels. Pressure from the DPR to make journalists cooperate. It was interesting tendency too, and this influence to Mariupol journalists. We can see some information that pro-Russian propagandists called front to Mariupol journalists in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, and set about cooperate, to collaborate. Interesting thoughts of others, European colleagues, researchers. You can see that it's interesting, the same research of United Kingdom, and Barreiro said that if journalists' values and norms endured as the key element in the performativity of the data journalists interviewed during the research, they impacted their reflexivity to a similar extent. And Zilzer said, interesting another thought, the basic yet overlooked fact that journalists use news to achieve pragmatic aims of community. And journalists had some reflections in these interviews, and you can see some Mariupol journalists' thoughts about journalist safety. That they, for example, that they didn't say to invaders about their profession, that they are journalists. They cleaned phone, and for example, in particular, Facebook and Telegram channel too, and it saved their life. They had some reflections about the role of journalists in the siege of Mariupol, and you can see some quotes that, for example, you let the stories present pass through you, and it was really difficult for journalists there. And every day there was some kind of emotional shock, and I can say that I was very impressed by anything from the news, because there were things happening next to me that in principle made the news pale in comparison to what was happening around me. And we know about Chernov, Maloletka, and Stepanenko, but Mariupol journalists worked too, and it was their principles. You can see another quotes of Mariupol journalists, and yeah, it was dramatic experience of there, but they informed Mariupol residents, and the last channel of communications was the Telegram, because text messages loaded better. And some thoughts of Mariupol journalists about mission of the journalists in the war, in the siege of the city, for example. Yeah, and so you can see these some sorts, and I should say that I have another questions, of course, with my projects, but all of my respondents continue to work in media now. They have some period of the rest of the siege of Mariupol, but now all of them work as journalists. Yeah, and this is references, some information. I think it's useful to, and thus, as a conclusion, thus the analysis of interviews with Mariupol journalists showed in order to convince the audience of the veracity of the messages on Telegram, and journalistic credibility remains a requirement for working in this profession. And maybe in particular, that's why Mariupol journalists made their own Telegram channels. So thank you for your attention. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Olena, for this incredible insights at first. And yeah, we see that communication changed, not just new news were produced. We see how communication changed, and it gives us a lot of challenges we see. And actually, when we saw facts on the pictures, we can have more attention on the situations, but still people have need of information. And this they have access to information, it saves life. And it is very important thing that we should take in account. And I want to point one thing, that social media saved life, and it's saving life still. And it is interesting input to the discussion of security of social media, of importance of social media, and how it should work. Yeah. And and one thing, another thing is that Telegram channel is not so safe, so to say. According to the roots of an owner, he is Russian, and we don't know how how it works deeply, but still we have no choice. So it is a very interesting question that arises now according to this communication, and it should be analyzed as effective communication and as communication that is very dynamic and very challenging. Yeah, and thank you for this input, and yeah, and we will go further. And I need to mention my experience of analyzing media before the war. And I start with public events and how it represented in media. And when I was challenging to be understandable for external audience of Ukraine, I took I took Eurovision case as a case that could be described as ideal case for understanding how communication works. And yeah, and it would be interesting to understand another part of news, part of positive news, I would say, because newsmakers, journalists pay attention on negative news, and we see this negative news quite divided. And how works news? How work news that unite people? And for this point, Eurovision is an ideal model, and it is quite interesting to see how it works in this war period. But I have a lot of thoughts, but I want to give a floor to our next speaker, Barbara Barreiro Leon. She is, sorry, want to say in the right way, everything. A lecturer in the School of Language, Literature, Music and Visual Culture at the University of Aberdeen, explores how identities are represented through film, music and other contemporary arts. So Barbara, I'm happy to have you here on our panel discussion. Floor is yours.
Thank you for having me today. I'm gonna share my screen so you can see my presentation, hopefully. So can you see that? Yeah, okay. So yes, very much in connection with what Olena was saying, I also study Eurovision and how Eurovision represents cultural identities through not only music and performances, but also other visual elements. And today, of course, I'm going to be talking about this conflict and how it was, and it's still being represented in Eurovision. The first thing to understand is that Eurovision is full of national symbols, even though sometimes we don't notice them. It's full of them because, of course, each country wants to represent themselves. And one of the most basic ways of doing it is, of course, as you can see, the colors of the flags, right? This is a very important platform to present not only to Europe, because nowadays it's like a global phenomenon, European identities. And when I talk about European, I talk about all the countries that are part of Eurovision, because I know we have Australia, for instance. So only flags or the colors of the flag, but also other cultural heritage elements and monuments. You know, we have these postcards, and the postcards are the introductory videos of the countries just before the performance, and we have a lot of representation of their cultural heritage, the monuments, architecture, cities, and it's a central component of identity and this idea of creation, and also because this is maintaining in the time. And in regards to the flag parade, I think it's very important to highlight that it was only included in Eurovision in 2013, so it's quite recent, and also represents the beginning of the contest, or in this case, the national, well, the final itself. And it kind of reminds us of a military operation. That's how a military operation starts, you know, with all the countries presenting the flag. In this case, it's not a war or a conflict or a battlefield, but I will explain more about how Eurovision could be a battlefield on its own. And in this case, the national flag represents this sacred character of the nation. So you have to carry the flag with pride, and that's why all of them represent the country with the flag, and then the colors appear at the back. So people can actually identify with the country, and you will see a lot of people carrying their national flags in the Eurovision, even the fans. And not only if you are from Spain, you have to carry the Spanish flag. In Eurovision, these identities of the fans are quite fluid, and you can actually support another country and you can bear their flag with no problem at all. So I was referring to Eurovision as a battlefield, but even though, of course, this is a non-political event, however, lyrics about war and peace are not prohibited at Eurovision, and it's a recurrent theme that we see year after year. The EBU, the European Broadcasting Union, so the chiefs of Eurovision, they say that Eurovision song should ban lyrics, speeches, gesture of a political or similar nature. However, all of them, they need to represent their national identity, and sometimes they're going to be looking at the history of the country. And I have an example that I will present to you in a minute. However, to avoid the political side of it, and they can take pride in the history and the cultural part of it. There are some cases as well in the Eurovision that that presented political events, but they introduced this let's say this rule of not presenting political events after 2006, when the band Green Jolly from Ukraine, there were icons of the Orange Revolution participating in the contest with a song that were famous for during the Orange Revolution in 2004 and 5. They represented Ukraine in 2005, and at that point the EBU said, okay, we cannot go away with this, we need to introduce this rule. Also, there was another case in 2009. Georgia decided to withdraw because their song "We Don't Want to Putin," of course with reference to Putin, the EBU wanted them to change the name, but they refused. So they withdraw from the contest. So the EBU is taking these things into consideration now. There has been recent talks and discussions about the inclusion of Israel, and actually Israel is going to be participating, but they had to change the lyrics 3 times for this year because they made references to the current war with Gaza. And one of my favorites, I would say, images from Eurovision. This is from 2016. That's when Jamala won for Ukraine. But at that time, you can see the split screen. That's what we call the split screen, is when there's only one more country to get the votes. And you will see the split screen with a country who is going first. At that time was Ukraine. And the only other country to receive votes was Russia. So you could see like a virtual battlefield. Actually, you could see the tension between those countries at that time. And of course, at that time, the invasion of Crimea already happened. And I want to say something here, because there's this sense that whenever a country is in conflict, they win out of pettiness. And that's not what happened here at all. The Russian representative, Sergei Lazarev, actually won the jury vote, was the favorite to win the contest. But in the end, Jamala won. So you could see that moment when they were receiving the points, the defeat in the face of Sergei Lazarev, representing the victory of Ukraine and the defeat of Russia, even though, of course, this didn't happen in the actual battlefield at that side, but the fact that this was important in Eurovision. And I remember the following day, all the media was like, Ukraine won, and then in brackets at Eurovision. So it's quite representative. If we look at the lyrics of Russia around the time of the invasion of Crimea in 2014, you can get a sense of a threat, kind of. They were asking for, you can see the lyrics here of Dina Garipova, what if I could make us unify? Why don't we open our arms? Why don't we bury our guns? It's like, for me, it sounds like a threat to Ukrainian people. It's like, we're going to do something and we want Crimea. So we're going to be taking control of that. And the same happened in 2014 with the Tomachevi sisters. Closer to the crime, cross the step at a line. Now maybe there's a place, maybe there's a time, maybe there's a day you'll be mine. Again, for me, this doesn't look like a love song at all. It sounds like wanted to invade the country, your country, Ukraine. And at that time, you probably didn't notice these lyrics are not talking about a love relationship. But now in time, if we start to analyze all the songs, they kind of anticipated what their plans were at that time, and of course still today. The Eurovision Song Contest also has the representation of trauma. I said there's no place for political events, but when it comes to history and representation of trauma, in terms of defending your culture, your heritage, in order to preserve these traumatic memories that shook nations. Because these songs and the way of representing our oral history in order to transmit intangible heritage. So even oral history in regards to past songs that they don't have a space anywhere else to be shown. And this is what happened in the 2016 with Jamala and Jamala's song, 1944. So I have to mention that this is the first time that Ukraine participated after the conflict in Crimea. And because, of course, they couldn't participate of what was happening in the country. And this song talks about, as you, of course, would know, about the deportation of Crimean Tatars to Central Asia by the Soviet Union in 1944. And through Jamala's song, to reinforce the Crimean Tatar identity, there are some passages of the song where she sings in Crimean, in Tatar. And it's the first time that this ever happened in Eurovision, and still till this day. So there's a lot of symbolism and myths and as elements of the constructions of nations' identity, and one of them is history, of course. And if you see the staging, you can see even the Ukrainian flag. The way that she's dressed is very evocative of the folklore of Crimea as well. And you can get in that sense, of course, there's a connection of what was happening in Crimea and what happened in 1944. And there's this sense of the Eurovision Song Contest as a battlefield without material damage. Because you can say whatever, well, not whatever you want, but you can try to attack verbally with lyrics another country and nothing will happen. And you can do that in a very polite way as well, as this was the case. So winning the contest in this case is a winning victory, because you have this soft power. You are crowned in the heart of Europe. And that's here where we, as a population, we choose the winners. It's not about who has more money, who has more weapons. It's about the support of the spectators. So that's the good thing about the media war, apart from not being any material damage, of course. So after this and after the invasion of Crimea in 2014, there's also the regulation that was proposed by Ukraine, that the candidates that would represent Ukraine in the future couldn't participate or couldn't have participated in any concert or event either in Russia or Crimea. And because of that, some contestants have been made to withdraw, because and this happened in 2022 because Kalush Orchestra was not the first option. And going back to Jamala, as I said, she represents the Crimean Tatar identity, not only because her roots and her heritage is from there. She's narrating the events that happened to her own family, but she is reclaiming back Ukraine and Crimea as Ukraine in that sense. After she won, just the same night, all these politicians from Ukraine started to use social media, and especially what was Twitter at the time, now X, to also sending messages of appraisal for her, but also taking that messages as the hashtag Crimea is Ukraine. And Eurovision was a platform to show that. and to show to the rest of not only Europe, but the rest of the world what was happening in Ukraine. The prime minister said, "Bravo, Jamala, a brilliant and deserved victory. Ukraine wins and will continue to win. Crimea will be Ukrainian." And then the foreign minister said, "The truth always wins, as Jamala and Ukraine did tonight. Congratulations and many thanks. And please don't forget that hashtag Crimea is Ukraine." She even received honors from the Ukrainian president at the time. So, of course, this reinforces the idea of the winning person, and in this case, Jamala, as a hero of the country, right? The initial title of the song was not 1944, but it was Our Crimea, which of course made stronger references to recent events of the 2014 invasion. So they decided to change it so it would evoke like the historical traumatic part of the history of the nation. In that sense, the singer, the song doesn't make any specific references about 2014, but of course, after winning, she recognized that, of course, there's a connection in there. And of course, it is a very, very powerful song. And of course, you can see there was a lot of social media attention around the time of the Eurovision Song Contest to give exposure and awareness of what was still happening there. So this was a caption of the first time, well, just after Jamala won, so 15th of May 2016. Well, 3 days later, Russia bans the remembrance events on anniversary of Crimean Tatar deportation. So of course, there's a connection between these two things, the Eurovision and the Russia banning the remembrance events, because of course it made, because of the 1944, it made awareness of the historical events, and people would probably grow this national identity even more, and people from outside Ukraine would join this kind of remembrance events. But 3 days later, Russia decided that Jamala was so powerful that they needed to ban these events. And what is happening now? What's happening after the most recent invasion of Ukraine in 2022 in the Eurovision context? Well, remember that this is not a political event. They try to reinforce that idea year after year, but of course there's a simile and there's a connection. Martin Ostendahl, who is the Eurovision chief, he said, "How Europe feels very much affects the contest. It is also when you look back in time, you see that the Eurovision Song Contest is like a logbook of what has happened in Europe, what the trends have been in Europe. So it's like a mirror of what's the, not political situation, but sociological events. So in that sense, he reinforces the idea of the ban of Russia, because Russia has been banned from participating in the Eurovision Song Contest in the foreseeable future, and that happened just after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So Ukraine won, as you will know, in 2022, winning the public sympathy and the media war. So there was a very powerful song, Stefania, and making them winning, because this case, they won the public vote with a record of points. And this sent a message: Europe stands with Ukraine. And this is something that Eurovision does, even though this is not a political event. Again, this is how Eurovision mirrors the public opinion and the sociological events that happen around Europe. Last year, also Jamala, who is now an activist for Ukrainian identities and history, she is now collecting all the Crimean Tatar songs and music that's it's part of the heritage and could be lost due to the war. So she's now making a recollection of all these songs, and she has recorded them so they are not lost anymore. So she's kind of an activist politically, but also in terms of safeguarding the cultural heritage of Crimea. So apparently Putin was very pissed by that, so he decided that now Jamala is in the wanted list of Russia. So this makes a powerful statement of how Eurovision, it's a representation of the conflict itself, but how people became icons of a revolution. And this is what happened with Jamala. In regards to Eurovision, this is the latest kind of news that we have in regards to the conflict itself. As I said, Russia has been banned for the foreseeable future and won't be participating in the contest. Jamala is still one of the icons of Eurovision. She participated this year in the flag parade, and however, Russia is now wanted to capture her. So again, this speaks volume about the importance of Eurovision in popular culture and public's opinion. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for this deep input. And yeah, in Sweden they changed the rules to the, now I knew that they will change rule of voting, and we will see how it will go and how it will impact public opinion. Yes, but yeah, we have three speakers, and we have a representation of three types of strategies in battlefield of war, I would say. So one, propaganda strategy, public communication strategy in social media, and media strategy of providing narratives. And this triangulation help us to not avoid, but to go wider than just dichotomy of who is dichotomy of negative and positive, and dichotomy of sides of war. So yeah, it is, I think it is enough to have a discussion. So I see for the first question from Orest, please.